Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn. In today's episode, we're talking about AFC North data-based power rankings. So we're going to look at all of these teams. The rankings are based on past approximate value performances of the roster, the free agency additions, database grades of the incoming rookies, and the age of the roster. So this is sort of a best estimate. So based on how these players have played in the past that are the current starters, based on the incoming rookies in terms of what their potential is, based on the age of the roster and what effect that could have on them from an injury perspective and from a long-term success perspective, all those things are going to be looked at today in terms of these rankings. And I know I might get some hate from some people, but this is kind of how the data shakes. So again, and there's definitely going to be things that happen during the season that can affect things. I'm going to be doing some schedule-based stuff as well, more in-depth stuff on the actual rosters themselves pretty soon in the future. But this is just a general power rankings based on the overall data of all these teams. So again, let's just take a look at it. So starting with number 4, the fourth best team in the AFC North from a data perspective is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are essentially playing on borrowed time. There are great individual prospects on this roster. You know, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, of course, Joe Burrow. But the collection of talent makes it the worst roster based on data in the AFC North. This doesn't mean that they can't outperform the data. It's just the overall future outlook for the Cincinnati Bengals is suspect. I think when it comes to the Bengals, as much as people love Joe Burrow and they loved what he did early on in his career, it's kind of like, what have you done for me lately from a data perspective? Because yes, he has shown the ability to be a really great quarterback, but injuries and his sack rate, and the sack rate was like that in college, and the sack rate is like this in the NFL. There's a lot of stuff to really criticize him about. So this team, roster-wise, we might be giving him too much credit because he might be a great quarterback, but the roster around him is actually not that great. So taking a look at the offensive team ranking. So this takes a look at the offensive talent based on data. So again, it's based on the past performances of the roster. It's based on the age of these prospects. It's based on the incoming rookies in terms of their data. So it's based on all that stuff. And compared to the rest of the NFL, the Bengals rank 22 out of 32 teams in terms of the overall quarterback starter that they have and the depth that they have at the position. The running back position is ranked 27 out of 32. Wide receivers is ranked 29 out of 32. The biggest reason for 29 out of 32 here is because once you leave T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, what is your other wide receiver option? Oh, wait. And don't say Jermaine Burton because he hasn't played yet and he's not a starter yet. So you could add Jermaine Burton to that list and it would kind of rank it down a little bit. But again, what is their offensive talent at the wide receiver position other than those two positions? There's not a lot of depth there. There really isn't. I mean, you have two really great wide receivers. I know everybody wants to talk about tandems, but the NFL is really about three wide receivers now. It's about your flanker, it's about your slot, and in terms of everything from that perspective. So in your X. They don't really have all those options there. So again, that's the issue. You have two really great wide receivers and a bunch of guys. That's not enough talent. It really isn't. And no matter how great they are as individual players, it's not a lot of talent there. Then of course you get to the tight end position, which also is another area where it's lacking. And then don't even get me started with the offensive line. Yes, they did take Amarius Mims, but this has not been their history at drafting that position. They're one of the least athletic offensive lines in the NFL prior to this. They probably were ranked 31 or 32 out of 32 teams, and now they're ranked 28 out of 32 after drafting Amarius Mims, who isn't even a starter right now yet. So, again, offensive rank 31 out of 32 in terms of the collective data, in terms of what they've done in the past, in terms of the age of the roster, in terms of the data of the roster, the depth, everything like that. Not that talented of a football team. It just isn't. They have a lot of work to do. They have great individual players, but the bulk of the roster, any injury that happens, you're going to have issues. You're going to have problems. Then, of course, you get to the team-based defensive ranks. The edge position is 32 out of 32. they have a lot of work to do in terms of improving the edge position there. And a lot of that comes down to age and stuff like that. Yes, Trey Hendrickson is a great individual player, but again, when you look at the person who plays opposite of him, and then you look at the age of that particular position and the talent behind them, not that great. Defensive tackle, 22 out of 32 teams. Linebackers, pretty solid, 11 out of 32. Cornerback, 7 out of 32. And then, of course, safety, 17 out of 32. So the back half of their defense is a little bit better than the front half. Overall defensive rank would be 22 out of 32 teams. So, again, not the worst. Their defense is better than their offense, but this just kind of shows you the injuries that they have and some of the weaknesses that they have in this roster. It's not as great as a lot of people think they are. And again, this is not the same team that went to the Super Bowl. This is a totally different team. They don't have the same talent that they had back then, and it shows. It really shows, and also in terms of depth. So this is an issue here. Joe Burrow can't cover up all these issues. Then of course you get to the AFC North number 3, which is the Cleveland Browns. The Browns are a solid overall NFL team, but this division is very competitive. The wide receiver core is much improved, and the defensive side of the football remains strong. I still don't see these moves as large enough to take over the AFC North, though, and that's kind of the biggest issue is that they keep making moves. They brought in Deshaun Watson. Again, I'm not going to speak too much on that. Hasn't really played up to his ability from the past, but they brought him in, and they gave up a lot to get him in there. But they also are another team that they're playing on a lot of borrowed time. They haven't really been replenishing their roster in the draft in terms of drafting really great players. So because of that, they are a team kind of in flux, if you will, in some ways. So this is an interesting roster, though. It could emerge as a playoff team again. When you look at the team-based ranks, the quarterback position is 9 out of 32. The running back position is 20 out of 32. A lot of that is because of the age of Nick Chubb. So that's going to be definitely a position that they're going to have to think about long term of getting somebody in there to replace them. The wide receiver position is ranked 6 out of 32. Tight end position, though, 28 out of 32. A lot of that is because David Njoku is older at the tight end position. He did have a renaissance year last year, but again, a lot of times when players like have that peak season like he had last year, they don't always come back and do the same thing again. We'll see what happens with that, but that definitely is a little bit of a concern. And then offensive line-wise, they're still pretty strong there. So the offense is pretty solid. They haven't really lived up to the expectations, though, of what is capable of them. And again, when you look at the running back and tight end position and the skill talent, they still are lacking a little bit. So I do think this team does have potential to be really competitive at their on the offensive side of the football, but they do have some concerns as well. When you go to the defensive side of the football, the edge and defensive tackle position are probably the biggest weaknesses. Again, not based on individual talent, though. Obviously Myles Garrett is one of the best, if not the best, defensive end in the NFL. But again, he is also getting older, and the secondary talent they have and the depth they have in terms of the backups and everything else like that, talent-wise, is not where it needs to be. The depth isn't there. The extra little oomph is not really there, which is kind of the biggest thing that hurts them. And then, of course, at the defensive tackle position, that's still a position in influx in terms of that as well. This also takes into account the addition of Michael Hall Jr., who we really don't know 100% what he is right now, but based on a baseline ability, it would still make them 29 out of 32 based on that. However, the back half of this team is much stronger in terms of overall depth. The linebacker position is pretty solid. The cornerback position is solid. Number 2, safety, 6 out of 32 teams. And overall defensive rank would be 13 out of 32. I think in terms of individual performances, they'll still be a really great defensive team. So when you take into account Myles Garrett, he can cover a lot of flaws. When he's taking on triple teams and stuff like that, it's going to give other people more chance to shine. But I think they definitely need more depth and talent at these positions, and I think that's definitely a concern for long term. They have to kind of target those positions to kind of give more youth and more depth there. So this is the Browns in a nutshell. I think if unfortunate events happen, this team could be in for some troubling times in 2024. But based on what they have right now, this would be the third best team in the AFC North based on the overall data perspective. So then, of course, we get to number 2 on this list, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers. The addition of both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields gives the Steelers hope of a revamped offense in 2024. I see improvements there, but it will be a work in progress. So the defense will continue to be the heart and soul of Pittsburgh, but the data does not forecast enough talent to make them the top dogs in the AFC North. So believe me, the Steelers are going to have a great defense. The offense is still more the mystery box here because Russell Wilson has not really been playing up to his past talent. He's always had inconsistent offensive ability, but he might be going to a team where he might be able to showcase that stuff. But when you take a look at the offensive team data, they have really good quarterback depth, 8 out of 32 teams in terms of that. The running back position, though, is 21 out of 32. So, again, the depth there isn't really there. The wide receiver position is 24 out of 32. Again, depth-wise, there's not a lot there for the Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of wide receiver position there. And then when, of course, you get to tight end, there's a little bit more depth. And then offensive line-wise, very strong offensive line. So from that perspective, it's kind of like the Seahawks, with the exception of not really Marshawn Lynch. So they kind of have mediocre wide receivers, and mediocre running backs, but they do have a solid quarterback, and of course you have the tight end position, the offensive line position. So this is going to be a solid offense. Again, is it going to be a great offense? No, but average. I think that's kind of what you're maybe slightly above average. And I think that's all you really need to get it done in the NFL sometimes is just an average offense because the biggest positive for them is on the defensive side of the football, especially when it comes to the edge position and the defensive tackle position. Those are exceptional. Linebacker, though, a little weak, 23 out of 32 teams. Cornerback, also weak. A lot of that is because Joey Porter Jr. had flashes, but he'll need to improve in 2024 as a consistent starter. A lot of people kind of had him as Rookie of the Year, but when you look at his approximate value ranks last year, it wasn't exactly where it needed to be. So, Joey Porter Jr. does have the talent to kind of help boost this up a little bit, but the overall talent of the cornerback position is lacking in terms of depth. And then, of course, we look at safety, 4 out of 32. So overall, defense-wise, I think they would be a top 10 defense this year or better. The offense, of course, again, is going to be slightly above average, but I don't think that's enough to be the top dogs in the AFC North. I think they could compete for that position if they really overly correct. If a bunch of injuries happen to, say, the Baltimore Ravens, I think they would have a shot. But this is kind of how things are looking for them in terms of this year. Then, of course, you get to the AFC North number 1 team, which would be the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens had some shakeups this offseason, but the core of the team remains solid. Lamar Jackson has solid skill talent around him, and the defense still has strong positional talent at safety and linebacker. So when you look at the Ravens, there are some inconsistencies. Running back and wide receiver is average depth there. But when you look at the tight end depth, it's fantastic. You look at the offensive line depth, it's fantastic. So again, the running back and wide receiver depth is nothing really special there. Again, and I'm not really talking about Derrick Henry though. I'm more so talking about the depth behind him and those other sort of players and positions. So this is going to be a really great. This might be the best offense that Lamar Jackson's actually ever played in the NFL. So do not be surprised if he goes and has like 4,000 yards passing with 1,000 yards rushing. I think that definitely is a possibility for him this year. I know it's crazy to say that, but I think that is a possibility. But this is kind of what you're looking at here. Really good offensive talent for Lamar Jackson to really shine this year. And then when you go to the defensive side of the football, the defense I think might take a little bit of a step back. The edge position I think is a position of weakness. When you look at the overall depth and the talent there, it's not really there. Defensive tackle is a similar situation. The depth is not really there. Again, I'm not talking about individual players. I'm talking about the depth of that position is not there. The linebacker position is pretty strong for them, obviously. The cornerback position is a little weaker. They did draft 2 cornerbacks that do have potential to be really good, though. So that could improve if they really show signs, of really good play this year. I think this number could, drop them, could make them rank a little better. And of course the safety position is number 1. They have probably the best safety in the NFL right now. But overall defensive rank would be average, be 16 out of 32. Do they have the potential to improve this? Absolutely. But I think when you look at the overall Ravens team in terms of the front 7 specifically, it's lacking a little bit. The edge and the defensive tackle positions are lacking, and I think that's going to force the Ravens to have to maybe be in more shootouts this year. It's surprising to say that, but yes, I think that's something that might happen. But again, they're still going to be good. I still have them as a top team in the AFC North. When you look at the overall ranks, though, so this is how the offensive ranks are for these teams. You can see the quarterback position pretty solid amongst all the players here. They have a lot of really good, solid quarterbacks here. Running back positions, similar situation. Not anything really big to really write home about here on the offensive ranks. When you go to the defensive side of the football, the edge ranks are kind of wildly different in many ways in terms of that. But overall, this is how the data stacks up for the AFC North. I think the Ravens are going to be the top team. The Steelers would be number two. The Steelers are close, though. So I think there is some wiggle room that if some injuries happen here and there, they could become the top dog in the AFC North this year. But I think it's more so going to be the Ravens. And the Cleveland Browns would be number three. And then four would be the Cincinnati Bengals. So with all this stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. Check out my other work at patreon.com/jcoburn. Also, check out my other stuff on X, formerly known as Twitter account at Geometrics. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.